Hello, welcome to the award-winning Transfer Gutter Show. For those tuning in for the first time, because it's free, but you can get loads of it behind our paywall, so it's well worth investing in. But you get this one for free. I'm Rob Gutmann, the host of The Gutter. This morning I'm joined by Stewart, Beth Lindop and Neil Atkinson, the host of everything else we do, more or less. But Neil's going to play second fiddle to me today and to Martin Zubimendi, because news is breaking on the wires. It did overnight, and there's been more detail this morning that Liverpool are, I'm going to say, perilously close to solving their number 6 problem. Was it a problem? Well, we've debated whether it was. Feels like for a good year or so, we've watched the likes of Curtis Jones, Gravenberch, even Dom Szoboszlai, McAllister, Endo try and fulfil the role. But Liverpool have decided to put a lot of their chips, reportedly about £51 million worth, potentially, in paying Martin Zubimendi's release clause to spirit him away from Real Sociedad. So we have one of those, feels like really quite rare occasions on the transfer gutter where we have a live one, Mo Stewart, an actual potential Liverpool signing, and a really exciting one. And I'm not going to pretend, if you took me back, 6 months or so, that my dream number 6 for Liverpool was Martin Zubimendi. But having seen bits of him through the Euros, having become more aware of other clubs being interested in him, I knew Barca had an interest in him. I knew Arsenal were quite keen at one point. And then when you look at lists of the best number 6s in Europe and you park Rodri and maybe Declan Rice, there's a battle royale, I think, for the third best number 6 in Europe slot, and he's as good as any contender, and that makes me quite excited. What about you?
I think that's fair. I've seen him quite a bit over the last couple of years for Sociedad, and I've always thought that this is a good player, someone who could do well in our team. I think under Jurgen Klopp, I thought we were potentially looking for a different kind of 6, more of a ground coverer, more of an aggressive tackler. And that's not necessarily Martin's game, but seeing the changes that Slot has made to the team, and particularly in the midfield, and how the priorities have changed, he has come very much into view in terms of him being a perfect fit for what Slot's Liverpool looks like they're wanting to do. It's fascinating, though, because there's an argument to say, well, he's been there for a while, so what's taken so long? But I think there probably has been quite a few machinations going on behind the scenes. I think you mentioned some of the other clubs that have been in for him. He said no to a lot of them. He said no to Arsenal, he said no to Man United, he said no to Barcelona, he said no to Bayern Munich for different reasons. So the question is he definitely going to say yes to Liverpool now? Well, it seems like the way that the club have been moving, they've waited until they were sure that, yes, he is willing to say yes to us, and then he's going to come over. But as a player, I think he can definitely enhance what we want to do.
I think, I'm going to speculate here, Beth, what's changed between, let's say, a year ago for Martin Zubimendi and his suitors then is that his club, Real Sociedad, were in the Champions League and they have not qualified for it this year. He's also a year older, having, he through their academy, their much vaunted academy. He's definitely done his bit. He's a protege of Xabi Alonso's. Maybe him and Xabi exchange WhatsApp messages every now and again. And I think, that those are some big shoes to fill, but it would be Xabi showed, go from that academy, make your name there, put your stint in, be loyal, but then move on. And the Premier League and Liverpool are an exciting progression at this point in that boy's history, I'd contend.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also as a player, you have to be aware when your stock is at its highest or near its highest. And I think certainly after that cameo in the final against England, he's had a lot of admirers, and I think that was probably the first time for a lot of people where they sort of sat up and took notice. And I know watching that game, when I saw Rodri go off, I thought this could be a real good thing for England. And obviously, as it transpired, Zubimendi was excellent in that second half. So I think he's at a point now. He's 25, so he's approaching the next year or two. He's going to be sort of looking to reach his peak, and so if ever there was a time for a big move, I think it is now. I think that the parallels with Xabi Alonso are very much there, obviously, in terms of being a product of, I know he's been there longer than Alonso was in the youth ranks at Sociedad, but having come through the reserves as well, and he spent time under Alonso during his days at Sociedad B. So I think he's someone who's spoken sort of glowingly about Alonso and what he learnt from him, even in a short period of time. And Alonso has sort of been as glowing in return to him, because he said he's a player that any coach would like. Which, if Alonso thinks that, then that's good enough for me.
Good enough for me too, I will add. Just to give people some approximate details, Guts Bomb key statistics, we're going to call them. He's 25, as others have referenced. He's 5'11", which I heard you describe in the show as diminutive. Neil, was it you described him as a diminutive 5'11"? You're a harsh heightist.
Very good in the air.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Yes, also your stats. Show demonstrated that. I recommend tuning into that. He played as people said, played 4 times at the Euro, deputised for Rodri in the final. He's played 188 times for Sociedad, scoring 8 goals. Interestingly, he's only missed 3 games in the past 2 seasons, so he's ticking a lot of Liverpool's boxes. Neil, are you excited by this one?
I'm about as excited as you can be about a holding midfielder. I mean, it's worth sort of being crystal clear. He's a holding midfielder. That's what he does. So, I think that's a good thing. I think it has ramifications or suggestions elsewhere. I wonder if Dominic Szoboszlai has said, I do not want to do that. Please don't ask me to the manager after he had a performance there against Arsenal, which might be one of the things that's changed from Liverpool's side in order to move things along quite quickly. I'm quite of the view that there's, across the board, I think, from what everyone said, doing the shows and listening to the shows of people talking about him is what's actually got me more excited. I think the highlights reels are phenomenally dull around him, but the key thing is, and now having seen Slot's sides play in the flesh, the big thing is he's another midfielder Liverpool have got who looks really, really good under pressure, will keep it ticking over, will be dogged in his attempts to win his duels, but simultaneously is not just someone who sits in front of the back four and is a tackling monster. That's not what Liverpool want. They want someone who's press resistant, who plays really, really well under pressure, who can keep the ball moving, and as I've been saying all the way through, who can both bait the press, build the play, and then back the play up. And that's what Liverpool are looking for from these midfielders. Everything else, I think, is, anything on top of that becomes a bonus. But the fact that he, is obviously very good in the air, the numbers say he's very good in the air, times his leaps really well. That's one of the things you see in the highlights reels, times his leaps really well in order to be able to get up and win the ball, which will be very, very important in this league. For me, he comes in and he looks like he could play with any of the other 3 who are likely to play in that position in terms of Jones, McAllister and Gravenberch. You can see how that could work with all of them. Similarly, I think that all of those could play together as well. As far as I'm concerned, I think Liverpool have now got themselves in a position where there's no excuses. Again, this is the big thing. It was the best thing about last season with Klopp didn't want any excuses, but there's no excuses certainly at the heart of the midfield. Liverpool have got 4 really good ones to play in that slightly deeper 2, backed up by Szoboszlai, Bajcetic, Nioni, allowing for the idea that Endo and Morton probably both move on. That's for what is effectively what I've described there as 2 positions. To have 7 of that quality, I think, is really, really important, and be able to go from there. And so I think it's a really good thing all round. I think it's a really good thing. And then there might be the idea that he can grow and improve. It's the funny thing about Sociedad is that they are very, and have been for a couple of seasons, they're a very conservative outfit. That's not to say they don't play football, but their games involve very few goals. Very few goals. Sociedad's games have averaged almost less than 2 goals a game across the last couple of seasons. If they win, they tend to only win by 1 goal. Both seasons back-to-back, they've only scored about 50. Last season, their expected goals was only about 43, and they scored about 51. This is not a side that's playing expansive, risky football. The top scorer for Sociedad last season got 9. We know that because when we talked about Cuba, we only got 7. And we were saying, but the thing about this Sociedad side is they're not throwing the kitchen sink at things. And I don't think Liverpool are going to throw the kitchen sink at things, but there's an onus if you play for Liverpool, or if Liverpool are going to achieve their ambitions this season, that they've got to be getting circa 85 plus league goals. So it will be different for Zuber Mendy, but then that might be what he's waiting for. And I think the other thing that's changed with him is, you mentioned playing Champions League football, but the other thing he's just done is he's just won a trophy and played a key part in a final of winning a trophy. And I just sort of think that there's lots of good things about the loyalty that the Basque players have to the clubs in the Basque region. But there must be something there where he's thinking, I quite like winning trophies. I'd like to win some more. And that's unlikely to happen at Sociedad. That's to say, not to say it's impossible to be insulting to Sociedad, but they came 6th last season, 4th the season before. You feel like there's a ceiling there. And the point of him coming to Liverpool is there is no ceiling. But part of that, therefore, means he's going to be playing in a side that's much more progressive.
Yeah, I think Sociedad will ultimately accept the fact that their best players will move on, but they don't have a choice in this case, in that there's a release clause. I just want to, before I come back to you, Mo, on Zuber Mendy, I want to just go through a couple of quotes that interested me from Xabi Alonso. I'm not sure exactly when he said it. I know it's in 2022. He said he has that ability to generate play, to make those around him better, always offering solutions to improve the move. He understands what the next step is before the ball gets to him. He has that ability to organise the axis. I loved working with him. Xavi, ex-Barcelona manager and midfield maestro, said he is someone who dominates with and without the ball. Those are some referees there, Mo.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I had a little chuckle to myself when Neil said that his highlights were dull, because it's like his highlights aren't really his highlights. His highlights are other people's highlights.
Yeah.
And I think, again, there was that period towards the middle to around just after the turn of the year where we really got to see what we could do with Alexis McAllister closer to the opponent's goal. And we all got very excited. And then the team changed, and then it kind of moved back again, and it kind of stuttered a little bit. And I think that McAllister is going to be the guy the most happiest to see Zuber Mendy come to the club, because it's going to be like, okay, I can really start to spread my wings here. And he's that guy who, I think when we're talking about Liverpool being more progressive than Sociedad and Liverpool scoring more goals than Sociedad, I think the thing we also need to acknowledge is the fact that it's not just about scoring goals, it's about the goal difference. That's really what win leagues. Like, you can look back and say the teams with them scored the most goals don't always win the league. The teams who concede the least goals don't always win the league. The team with the best goal difference normally wins the league. And that is about having a good defensive structure in place that allows the attacking players to still be free to go and attack without it always being a catastrophe every time the ball gets lost. And I still think towards the last season, we didn't really get that right. I think this is another move towards getting that right, because the thing that Zuber Mendy impresses me the most about his game is his understanding, his reading of the pitch as a whole. And he's not the quickest. He has a good acceleration. He's not the biggest, not the strongest, but he knows where to be. He's such a great manipulator of space. He always knows the best place to position himself to help his teammates either gain the ball or progress the ball, or stop the opponents getting to your goal. And I think he's going to be one of those players who is going to be more popular with the guys in the ground who are maybe seeing the game differently than the ones who are watching it on TV. Because on TV, you kind of follow the ball, don't you? Whereas a lot of the time, when you're in the ground, you can see guys moving around without the ball or almost independently of the ball, and then suddenly the ball comes to them like a magnet. And I think he's going to be one of those guys.
I'm interested, Beth, more I read about him and watch his clips, that he's very much the fulcrum in the defensive midfield sense of that Real Sociedad. In fact, in every sense. What little we've seen of Arne Slot's Liverpool so far, it's been a double pivot. Now, he's not been playing in a double pivot often, from what I can tell, for Sociedad. Is this a sign? No, I don't want to get carried away and assume that Martin Zubimendi is going to start every single game for Liverpool. Slot may see him as an option as much as he may see him as a starter. But if he's going to start with the money invested in him and with his growing reputation, you can imagine a world where he is close to being a first name on a team sheet if he begins to fulfil his potential. But if that happens, are we going to see more of a 1-2 setup in midfield than the 2-1 we've seen thus far, do you think? Or do you think he'll play alongside a partner, quite in a parallel, effectively?
I think it at least gives Slot the option, and I think with the volume of games that Liverpool are going to play, certainly once sort of September kicks in, having that option and having that flexibility is massive. I think, perhaps it's a case of trialling him alongside a few different players, trialling him alongside McAllister, or, if he is starting in a 2, then maybe the other person has more of a license to go forward a little bit more, and he's the one who sort of anchors the team. I just think it gives Liverpool so many more possibilities, which is really, really exciting. And I also think, whether Liverpool sign a defender or not this summer, I think the defence is something that I've been a little bit concerned about at times over the past year, which is why I would quite like them to bring in another body there. But I do think having that element of control, that if he does fulfil his potential that Zuber Mendy brings, could be hugely beneficial for the back line as well, because I think all of a sudden they're not having to scamper back every time, Liverpool are losing the ball, and these transitions are just absolutely killing the team. And I think there were moments last season, as exciting as the football was, it felt like every time the opposition got the ball, Liverpool were vulnerable to the counter-attack. And I think having someone who can bring that stability, whether that be in a two or whether that be by himself, is really important and could be really beneficial for the players behind him as well.
He played more. What's interesting with his defensive activity, in terms of at least in the Champions League, is he pulled more to the right in terms of where he was doing more of his defending. So that could just be an aspect of team setup. We've seen that in the past with the way we set up as well, but it's suggestive that that's the side he's more comfortable on. That's also when you do watch the highlights packages where you do see him doing a little bit more of that defensive work, is in that zone, almost on the right hand side, and I think that could well be another thing that Liverpool like the look of. That's what it's been about for him. I think it's I think in terms of precisely what the manager wants, I would just be surprised if there were marked changes. But for instance, the game against Manchester United in the pre-season friendly, it's noticeable that effectively Jones literally scores a goal from inside the 6-yard box. Jones has got more licence from the left of the two to push on than Gravenberch has from the right of the two. In that game, I think you've seen it sort of semi-consistently. Well, I mean, it's let's not get too sort of bogged down in pre-season games, but also in what we saw, because Jones played from the left of the two with Endo in the first one against Betis, and it felt for the first half an hour Jones was deeper than Endo. So you don't want to get too carried. But the point is that you get to be what the game requires. So it may well be, there's loads and loads of McAllister does his best work to the left of Caicedo in a two, playing next to playing at Brighton. I think Endo tends to pull a little bit more to the right towards the back end of when he was partnered with McAllister, and McAllister then again back to the left. Jones seems happier on that side as well. I just think it offers Liverpool another option of genuine balance in there, and I think that balance is going to be a lot of what this team needs all the way through. So there may be games where Liverpool play with one holder and two go. There may be 20 minutes in games where Liverpool play with one holder and two go. But I think that Liverpool will, have worked clearly on that build-up from the basis of where you got your goal kick. They've worked in a very clear way. I don't see that disappearing off one signing. I think that will be difficult to see. But I think having the option to do it, either, as I say, game to game or in game for a period, is no bad thing. But it's also worth pointing out that McAllister does a really good job as the deepest line midfielder solely himself as well last season. I think that all of this, is about giving Liverpool and giving Slot options, really good options, but that they're all options, and then from there he can kick on. As Rob says, this is the Gutter Show. It is a pleasure to do them. It's always a pleasure to hang out with Rob in general, and certainly when it comes to talking about transfers. There'll be another one of these on Saturday, and then Tuesday, and then Thursday back out for free next week, and so on until the end of August. Everything that you need in terms of keeping in touch with what Liverpool are or aren't doing in the market. But around Zuber Mendy, we had lots of excellent stuff as well. I did a stat show yesterday. You can judge whether or not that's excellent. Huge thanks to StatsBomb for the support around all of that. John Gibbons spoke to Lewis Steele and to Rob Palmer. Both had fascinating things to say. And earlier today, Josh Sexton also spoke to Graham Hunter. I grabbed a guy called Jamie Kemp, who hosts a podcast about La Liga called La Pausa. It was a pleasure to speak to him as well. Everything that you need on any major player Liverpool are signing or linked with on the Anfield Rap at every single opportunity. It's a pleasure to be able to leap into action. The office yesterday was absolutely buzzing as the Zuber Mendy link firmed up. It was a really nice environment to be part of, and it was great for all of those people gave their time to come and support us and tell us more about this footballer. Those days, they're good when you get to do the Anfield Rap, but they're also good when you get to subscribe to the Anfield Rap as well. So please consider doing so if you haven't done already. There's ways to do it through the app, through the website, through Patreon as well. Loads of different ways to take the time with the Anfield Rap. If you're not sure, download the app and use the free tokens and go from there. You can get those shows and others as well. And then from next week we're able to build more and more into the excitement at the start of the new Premier League season. Coming back from tour, feeling energised by tour, energised by new signings and a fantastic season on the horizon. There's never been a better time to be part of the Anfield Rap. I'm Neil. Thank you very much for everything, and let's get back on with the show.
A thing that fascinates me, Mo, about the potential of Martin Zubimendi coming in is what it will suggest about the already competitive nature of the competition for places in Liverpool's midfield. Look, without getting into too much into the broad question of what does a squad game look like these days and how and the rotational aspects of it, etc., etc. The biggest games, the big players want to play in. So there is a notion of a first 11 in players' minds and in supporters' minds and probably in managers' minds if we're honest about it, and it's been ever thus. I think most would say that McAllister is a first pick in most people's minds in a Liverpool midfield under any manager at the moment. If we're investing in this six and have prioritised this position so comprehensively, and we're getting a player of this profile, it's not unreasonable to suggest that Zuber Mendy is going to get a spot, first 11-ish spot more often than not. That leaves us one more spot now for a load of lads. Now, of course, they can all do bits in the other positions too. But there are a few of them, Curtis Jones, Harvey Elliott, Gravenberg and Dom Szoboszlai, and you can extend that even to Stefan Bajcetic, etc., are going to be scratching their heads, possibly the other side of a Zuber Mendy signing, thinking, hang on, if those two lads are first picks for the biggest games, which one of us gets the third pick?
Well, I think it's interesting because they're going to be saying different things to different people. I think with Stefan, we can still say to him, look, you were out for a very, very long time. You came back very, very briefly last season. We are still absolutely building you up. You will get enough minutes over the course of the season to prove yourself. You don't need to be in any rush. That's fine. We can box him off in that respect. I kind of agree with Neil in terms of the fact that Szoboszlai has probably intimated that he'd rather be within the attacking ranks rather than in the central midfield, which kind of allows Slot to say, well, okay, then you kind of brought this on yourself then, mate. You can't be then complaining about game time if you're then saying, well, I'd rather do this than that. And then obviously you've got Jones and Elliott, who I think are probably in the trickiest situations.
And Gravenberg.
So, yeah, actually, that's a good point. Yeah, Gravenberg too.
Yeah, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels like there's not one too. Believe me, I don't think it's one too many. The more the merrier. And I'll come on to the counter arguments to this, obviously. But go on.
I wouldn't say it's too many. I think the other thing we have to understand and remember is that the likelihood of them all staying fit all season long is still very, very low.
Well, absolutely.
We are going to get to a point in the situation where it's going to be like, okay, well, it's clear who's playing this and who's playing there. And I think we have to allow for the fact the vagaries of form as well. They're not all going to be at their peak form for the whole course of the season.
Especially if they're not getting picked, they're not, because there's rhythm issues.
And also,
so it can become self-fulfilling.
Some of them are going to be more used to what it takes to play at a big football club. So I think the likes of Harvey Elliott in particular, he'll be like, okay, this is the club that wants to win 4 trophies every season. So I'll know that I'm not going to be able to play every single game I want to. Like, he was literally in the same position last season. He did, like, Klopp at the end of the season was apologising to all of us for not playing Harvey Elliott more. And so he's been in that situation. Whether or not he gets frustrated at it happening again under a new manager is a different question. But you do wonder whether or not the difference in what they're being asked to do makes it a little bit easier and more palatable, because it's not like you're not getting a lot of games, and when you're in, you're getting run around. You're not getting to show what you can do. You're not getting to show your flair qualities. Whereas now they will be. Like, we've already seen Curtis talk about how different his job is now compared to what it was previously. Maybe that's going to be the key to keeping them all happy.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, there was obviously the question I put to Mo was loaded with presumption. It presumes Zuber Mendy's at the level you think he might be at. It presumes that him and McAllister can stay on at a very, very high level of form consistently. but it has the potential to cause problems within the squad. But I think Liverpool have weighed this one up. I can ebb and flow with this one. There were moments out on the, looking at the selections on the tour when Curtis Jones went off injured and Naoni came on. I thought, yes, I know we don't have McAllister and Gravenberch, but still our next pick is a 17-year-old boy. There has been a sense that we could, and then you, in fact, sorry, my point is really, and then you see Endo on the pitch and go, God love him. I know he had some good games, but he is not the level. He wouldn't get in the Man City or Arsenal squads. So we needed to upgrade there.
Yeah, that was the one area of the pitch, and I know the club have sort of briefed this, that is the one area of the pitch where they feel like there is a glaring hole, and for that reason they've needed to sort of bolster the ranks a little bit. And I also think it is a case of, Slot's probably looked at his squad and probably a number of those players don't actually want to play in the six. So like Mo sort of said, if those players don't want to play there, and we could sort of take from that clip of Curtis Jones and Dominic Szoboszlai sort of winding each other up, saying, my number 6, and then both laughing. If they don't want to play there long term, then they have to accept that the club is going to look for a specialist 6. And really, this is a saga. I know over the last year, it's been something that I feel like we've talked about nearly every week, Liverpool's lack of a real world-class 6. But it's a problem that's plagued them for nearly 3 years. I mean, just after Liverpool lost the Champions League final to Real Madrid, obviously Zuber Mendy, that transfer didn't happen. He ended up choosing Madrid. Then Fabinho has this horrible decline in form. And then obviously last summer with Caicedo and Lavia as well. So it's been something that Liverpool have been pursuing for a really, really long time. And I also think as well, sort of one of the fundamental reasons for Liverpool's drop-off last season, toward the end of the season, was that some players were just knackered. And I think Alexis McAllister was one of those players. And I think, having the ability to be able to rotate them, to rest them, to take them off at 60 and bring on a player who can come on and do a job as well, it can't be overstated how important that is. So I think, and as well, we know at Liverpool it does always feel like you're only sort of 2 injuries away from disaster, doesn't it? So I think having that complement of players and having players who are so versatile, players who can go into the forward line when they need to, or can drop back, I think there'll be more than enough minutes for everyone.
I think there is more than enough minutes for everyone. It only takes one injury, and you're in a situation where, in amongst those lads who are playing, effectively, I think there's 4 for the two deeper midfield positions. I think that it's Gravenberch, Zuber Mendy, McAllister Jones. I think you might get occasional Szoboszlai there, so let's whack him in. You'd be comfortable with any pairing of that, with the possible exception of Gravenberch and Szoboszlai. Anything else, you'd feel as though there'll be a way to make that work, and it might not always be, perfect, and it might take some other accommodations, but you'd have a real sort of sense of that'll work quite nicely. And then in that realm, just reduce it back to a 4. It's perfectly reasonable to assume one of them's injured at any given moment. So suddenly you're now picking 2 from 3, and all of a sudden there's a game week coming up where Liverpool play Manchester City, Newcastle, and Everton.
Yeah.
And what are you then able to do if you're Liverpool is that you're able then to say, well, we pick, effectively they all get 3 games, but they all get, some people get subbed in one game. One player gets subbed in one game, starts the next one. One player starts from the bench, starts the next one. And then you've got a situation where everyone's had a pretty intense week, but no one's overloaded. I think that Beth's point on McAllister's, I think it's really insightful and important. Last season, McAllister, I think, was excellent. But I do think that by the time you get to mid-April, he's not quite the force he was before that point. And there's other occasions during the campaign where McAllister was pressed into service when he shouldn't have been. It's worth saying McAllister's injury just simply comes from getting kicked. So you can have the smartest and best sports science in the world, but if you go to Bramall Lane and someone webs one of your players, then you can be looking after them all you like. He's out, and that's the way in which it goes. So but part of how you look after players is that you do manage the load on them and all of those bits and pieces. So I'm very much, of the view. I'm not even mildly concerned. And also, let's be clear about this. Our direct and most important opponents for the title have got the best player in this position in the world, but he ends up playing 60 games every season, and he repeatedly keeps saying, I'm knackered, I'd like to play fewer games, and then plays all those number of games, and because he's brilliant, he gets out the other side and it's all right. But if Liverpool can have better players in the aggregate in that position by virtue of them being fresher because the load on them's a little bit less, then I only see that as a good thing. I only see it as something that Liverpool could have that they don't. So, I think you've got to try and acknowledge. One of the things about having Rodri is you've got to pick Rodri because he's so important, because he's fucking Rodri.
Yeah.
Whereas Liverpool are in a position where they can be picking, it may well be that we get to the end of the campaign and we'd all say, well, it looks like, McAllister got the most time on the pitch. Number 2 was Zuber Mendy. Number 3 was Jones. And number 4 was Gravenberch. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's the way it breaks down. I think that's probably the likeliest way it breaks down over the course of the campaign. But you'd still be looking at, I tell you what, Curtis played a lot and he was really important when he did.
Do you think, though, the best outcome for Liverpool would be that 2 of these lads made themselves undroppable Rodri style?
Well,
no, go on.
I was going to say not necessarily. I think it's gonna be more beneficial if everybody gets used to playing well with each other, and they all have their own differences. They all have their own different chemistry, and I don't just mean in terms of keeping them all fresh. I think the other thing we need to acknowledge the fact is that we all know how important McAllister came to Liverpool over the course of last season. So does all of our opponents. Every single one of our opponents were going in there this season with a McAllister plan. What do we do to stop McAllister? Because if you stop McAllister, you stop Liverpool. Well, now that's no longer the case if you've got Zuber Mendy there as well. Because it means that A, we can play some games without McAllister and you've got a different kind of guy doing it. Or B, it means if they're both on the pitch, you can stop him. But he's over here still doing the same thing. And you putting all your efforts into stopping him frees up this other guy. And I think that's something we're going to see with Trent Alexander-Arnold as well, in terms of the fact that if you are putting so much time and effort into stopping these midfielders, suddenly we've got that midfielder who's lurking over there at right back. He can come in and find a little bit more space to be more dangerous. So I understand the notion of having a best 11 that builds up rhythm, builds up consistency in the way that Arsenal did last season. For a lot of it, they had like 8 or 9 players who pretty much played all the games. Like, you can do that when they're all 23, 24, 25. I think that's still a very rare thing to be able to say everybody should be able to do that. I think for us, we have to do it slightly different.
And also, Arsenal in the season, Jorginho is so important to them. At the end of the campaign, Jorginho is crucial to Arsenal and what they're doing. And, there's lots of reasons starting to not like the fact that Arsenal picked Thomas Partey. But if I was supporting Arsenal, what I saw on the tour is that he looks like a fucking pudding. Yeah. So you end up in this situation where, I thought he was dreadful against us, genuinely, absolutely, didn't look like a footballer. But part of the reason why is because the importance of getting on the ball rather than just winning your battles is now so important. So when the ball was dropping to him, he just looked to gear down in there. And I'm going to be the most boring man in the world, which I know I am, but no one has yet lived a reality as to what the Swiss system's going to do. And, the pot 4, Liverpool could get Bologna and Girona as the 2 pot 4 teams. They're 2 tough games.
Yeah.
Either of them away, they're 2 tough games.
Did you notice what Slot said last week, which I thought was instructive? He talked about Liverpool, our squad being of a decent size, having 2 players for each position. But he said some of our rivals have even more. And I thought that's interesting. He's signalling that 2 for a position isn't necessarily enough, maybe 3, because he's embracing implicitly what you're saying.
Yeah, I think when you're going to go through this campaign, Liverpool, pot 1 teams Liverpool can get Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Paris Saint-Germain, Inter Milan, Borussia Dortmund, Leipzig, which is the one everyone will want, and Barcelona. Pot 2 teams you could get Atletico Madrid. You could have Atletico Madrid at home, Juventus away, Bayern Munich at home, Real Madrid away, Bologna away, Girona at home. Then your pot 4 teams. Actually, pot 3 looks weirdly a little bit more straightforward, but you could have Celtic away, which would be its own weird thing. If you're Liverpool or Man United or Man City or Arsenal, it becomes weird if you've got to go to Celtic Park. The point being is that and these games are just getting dropped in. You know what I mean? We don't even know when they are yet. These games are getting dropped in, and you can have a bit of an attitude, but we could have to go to Juventus on the Wednesday between Wolves away and Palace away. That's a hard week. That's such a hard week. And also, what no one's, again, clocked with the Swiss system, and no one knows yet because we haven't lived one, is how many points do you need to get to come in the top 8? Because I think you might need, of your 8 games, I think there's every chance you probably need 5 wins. 5 wins, 1 draw will get you 16 points, and that might be enough, but that's winning 5 out of 8 games. That's load. That's, and without knowing.
Good.
And I think that is, until we've got that, so that's why for me, in terms of time on the pitch, in terms of importance, I think if you're Curtis Jones, if you're Ryan Gravenberch, if you're Alexis McAllister, you're going great because we're likely to win. I want to win, but also I know I'm going to get games. I know I'm going to get used. I know I'm going to be important. And then I've got to perform. I've got to, when that comes, I've got to perform, so I keep getting picked. Don't get me wrong. But I think it's, I think what it means is, again, it's back to this idea of, and this is what I don't want all the way through the camp, I just want no hiding places. No hiding places for anyone.
Okay. I think, who's it? Mo referenced Trent, Beth. Do you think that the potential signing of Zuber Mendy sort of simplifies the Trent debate in one sense, but then has a knock-on effect to Connor Bradley? In as much as we can say, yes, we're going to need a lot of midfielders, agreed, there's going to be the odd injury, but Zuber Mendy makes it about the right amount. We don't need Trent putting his oar in the midfield mix, really. I would say, well, actually, there's less of a case for him being considered part of that pool. And if that's the case, he's therefore first choice at right back, and that leaves Connor Bradley, who looks like there's a chance he may push on again and again, where?
Again, I think it's a very similar story to the midfield. I think there's just so many games and there's so many different types of opponents that you're going to have to face that I just think it just feels like such an alien concept, having two potentially world-class right backs at your disposal. I think we've become so accustomed to Trent being sort of the default there, and absolutely he is first choice based on what he's done in the past, but I think it feels sort of weird to not have this insane drop off if he doesn't play, and I think that can only be a good thing for Liverpool. And Trent, I don't know in terms of the actual numbers, but he's had a fair few knocks and muscle injuries over the past couple of seasons. He's had spells where he's been out for more than a month, and I think having a deputy like Connor Bradley, having someone who's not just there to sort of come in and do a job, but actually come there and stake a real claim for being a starter in the team, is no bad thing. And I think for Trent as well, I think there's maybe been a bit of complacency at times that has maybe crept in, and I think that's not really, through fault of his own. It's because he's not had anyone really challenging him. And I think now he has a genuine challenger, and I think, as much as we all want him to stay, and arguably he's the most important player to Liverpool, he has to show that he is the first choice right back. And again, he is another option in terms of going into midfield, depending on the quality of opposition. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue. I think Connor Bradley will know that there will be ample opportunity for him to prove himself over the course of the season. It might not be straight away. He might have to wait another, a month or two into the season before he really gets a chance to shine. But I think we'll see a lot of him this season, regardless.
I agree with that. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how Trent reacts, and not only how Trent reacts, but how the world reacts. I think particularly in the space between now and him signing a new contract, which I think we all hope is still going to be the case, if we get into a situation where there's a Premier League game or a Champions League game where Bradley starts and Trent's on the bench, there's going to be stories. There's going to be, is this going to be the reason Trent wants to leave, etc., etc. If we get to a stage where it's a big game, and it's on 70 minutes and it's a draw, and Trent comes off and Connor Bradley comes on, then the same. Mischief is going to start to be made. But if he's already signed up, already committed to the club, then that will be a taciturn acceptance that he's accepting of how this role goes. And again, I think he's ambitious enough to say that he wants to win trophies with Liverpool. So if that's the best method to him winning trophies with Liverpool, then he will accept it.
We're going to go to an insert now, aren't we, Neil?
Yeah, absolutely. Josh Sexton earlier on spoke to, I'll get it all up on my thing here, to Kamal Jasmith about his fundraiser for a rare spinal condition. So here is that.
And it's Josh Sexton for the Anfield Rap, and I'm joined today by a special guest in Kamal Jasmith, who, so for context, listeners of the Anfield Rap for a long time, or long-time readers of the Anfield Rap, may remember a name called Roy Henderson. Roy sort of originated from Rourke, and Rourke has been a big part of the Anfield Rap in terms of its inception, in terms of a bit of word of mouth and things like that down the years. Andy Heaton was a big player on Rourke back in the day. Still keeps his oar in whenever he can, but was always sort of active on the forum there. I probably should say Red and White Cop is the forum that we all call Rourke. You'd have heard us referring to it on the Anfield Rap. And so Roy reached out to me and said that there was this guy called Kamal who was joining me today, today, who is one of the old writers on Rourke. He's trying to raise money for surgery as he's suffering from a spinal condition. So we're just going to talk a little bit about that today, and a little bit about Kamal, and get a little bit more about your story. But first and foremost, Kamal, thank you very much for joining us on the Anfield Rap.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the support.
And so listeners with a keen ear may have heard there that you've got a South African accent. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing in South Africa, and particularly, how you came to be a Liverpool fan.
So I was born in South Africa. My dad was born in South Africa as well, during the apartheid regime as well. So I grew up during the apartheid regime, maybe towards the latter end of it. How I became a Liverpool supporter, my dad was a Liverpool supporter as well growing up. He spent some time in the UK, I think in the late 50s, early 60s. He was a Liverpool supporter as well. But I remember we'd get highlights of the Liverpool games, and I remember watching John Barnes, and I was like, yeah, this is the team. He was, carry on. Sorry.
So I was just going to say, like, what encouraged you then, as a Red, and as you're sort of going through your life as a Liverpool supporter, to get involved in Red and White Cop in those early days?
So I mean, as a Liverpool supporter, especially in South Africa, you only get to interact with people in South Africa back then, because there's no internet that time. And once the internet started growing and stuff, forums were a big thing. So I joined Rourke, Red and White Cop in, I think, the early 2000s, around 2003. And just to have a community to interact with people from all over, basically, talking about football and talking about Liverpool. I mean, it was quite enjoyable. I made a lot of close friends, even though it's online. You get to interact with people. You get to form like really, really good relationships. And I did whatever writing I could on the forum as well, on various topics, football and also non-football related as well.
And so have you had a chance to follow in your dad's footsteps of getting yourself over to Liverpool and to Anfield then? Is that something you've been able to experience?
Yeah, I was. I went to Liverpool in 2009, I think. Yeah. Right. It was my first time ever. I went to watch, it was the Champions League game versus Real Madrid, the 4-0. Oh. Yeah, and after that, United, the 5-1.
Amazing.
At Old Trafford. Yeah, it was my first games, and everybody just kept on messaging me. It's like, no, you're good luck, don't come back. So yeah, it was. I spent everything I had at the time just to go and to watch Liverpool. It was probably one of the best experiences of my life. I fell in love with the city at the time as well. Liverpool. It was incredible.
Yeah, and you've referenced that your dad is a Red too, and there's obviously been, a sort of complications in the relationship there down the years. Can you tell us a little bit more about your story with your dad and the things that he went through, especially as you mentioned, growing up in the apartheid regime?
Yeah, so my dad, well, he was born in South Africa as well, and originally my grandparents were from India. They came over to South Africa in the early, I think, 20s, and my dad was born in 1938, and growing up in the apartheid area, I don't know how much you know, but for anyone with darker skin, it was a nightmare. So around 17, he was sort of recruited to become an activist. He got a lot of it from my grandfather as well, who was an activist in India during the British rule of India. So, like, my grandfather marched with Gandhi as well in India, and then my dad in South Africa, he started becoming more active in the political struggle for freedom in South Africa from the age of 17. He was arrested at 17 as well. And then as he grew up, he started spending more and more time trying to fight for the freedom of South African people. He was one of the first freedom fighters to be sentenced to Robben Island prison before even Nelson Mandela for 10 years. And after that, he got released he was arrested in 1963, and he was released in 1973. And in prison, that type of prison, especially for a person with dark skin, it was the most torturous environment you could ever imagine. They didn't have a bed. There's no beds. They had one small blanket in a small cell. They showered with only cold water, no hot water either, and they were beaten and tortured, and it is as much as you can even imagine. He was released in 1973. During that time, after he was released, he was still very active in the struggle, and he fought as much as he could. There's also, I don't know if you've heard of the book Escape from Pretoria. There's a movie also with it with Elijah Wood. So it's based on a true story of the prisoner that escaped from Pretoria prison. And my dad was involved in the aftermath of that escape, having trying to get one of the escapees over the border. And what happened was he managed to get the escapee over the border, but because of he was still under house arrest for a certain period, he had to check into the police station all the time. And when he went for one of his check-ins, he heard the police talking about this prison escape, and he thought they knew that he was involved. And the face on his face, they immediately seen his reaction on his face, and they knew, okay, this guy has something to do. So then they started torturing him severely. They beat him up. They electrocuted him until he divulged what had happened. And because of that, he was sentenced to prison again for a 1 year suspended sentence. He managed to get a reduced sentence because when he went to the doctor, he hid all the scars that he had from the torture and only showed it to the doctor, not to the police officers and the warden. So when the doctors seen it, they used that as evidence of torture in the courts, and the courts gave him a reduced sentence. And then he was released in 1983, just a couple of years after I was born.
Yeah, and that's obviously an incredible story from his side of things. And then you sent me a little document beforehand for sort of context for the listeners. So I'm sort of going off little bits of that. But then there was a sort of period where he was, of course, suffering from extreme PTSD from everything he'd been through, and that was when you sort of took a big decision, which I'll leave you to talk about.
Yeah, so what happened was as I started growing up, I mean, it was just my dad and I. My mom passed away when I was very little, and he brought me up during that time. He did the best he could as a single parent. But as I started getting older, because of my physical condition, basically I have cerebral palsy, but I was misdiagnosed as a child. So as a child, the surgeons told my dad, well, my parents, that my condition is just a physical condition that can be fixed through therapy. So growing up, I've, carried on going to therapy, doing whatever therapy I needed, but there was no improvement. In fact, I was getting worse as I got older. And during my 30s, I started regressing even faster. Like my mobility was decreased. I'd always fall a lot, because with cerebral palsy, what it does, it affects your mobility. It causes spasticity throughout your body, which means that like all my muscles are permanently in a contracted state. So which makes movement almost impossible. And during my 30s, I noticed it started getting worse. And around that same period, I noticed my dad would wake up in the middle of the night screaming. And what it was sort of like a delayed PTSD from all the torture he experienced in prison and outside of prison, all the beatings he took. And so I decided that because I was getting worse and my dad was getting worse, it was just the two of us, I needed to do something drastic to try and improve my physicality, to improve my health so that I could look after him. And so I decided to go to the East, China and India for therapy and training and whatever for a year to try and improve my health as best as I could. Because firstly, it was more affordable than in the East than in South Africa. And there were specialists that could help me with certain things. So I made the decision in about 2016, end of 2015, beginning of 2016. I left for China. I decided to go for a full year because I thought, okay, my condition is just a physical condition. I can go spend a year, improve my health and my physicality, and then come back and I can look after him. My biggest fear leaving was that, leaving my dad alone. But I figured, while he was still capable, 1 year, it should be okay. But then 3 months into my stay in China, my worst fear came to pass. My dad passed away. It was the worst thing you could ever imagine. Imagine having your worst fear come to life. It broke me considerably. I couldn't handle it because all my life he was like my mother, he was my father, my best friend, all in one, all rolled into one. And then I decided I came back from China for the funeral and to deal with all the stuff that needed to be dealt with. Buried my father. I was alone, losing everything. I don't know if many people can imagine losing everything in such a short space of time. But I came back. I dealt with whatever needed to be dealt with. I don't know if you ever accept losing a parent like that. Especially, you start thinking, if I was there, what could I have done to stop it from happening? I know logically you shouldn't be thinking that, but it's always on your mind. And then I was in South Africa for about 8-9 months, trying to just wrap my head around stuff. And then eventually, because I hadn't finished all my training in the East, I decided to go back. I mean, I had already lost everything. I had nothing left to lose. So I might as well try to improve my health. And so I went back to China. I trained as hard as I could, as much as I could. I was training like 6 hours a day. And then after China, I went to India for there was different types of yoga therapy that I thought could benefit me. So I went to India as well. And it was only in India where I met with my aunt, first time meeting her as well. And she was a physiotherapist. And she sent me to a specialist, and the specialist, right upon seeing me, first thing she said, no, it's not a physical condition, and you have cerebral palsy. And I was like, no, you're wrong. I mean, I've been to so many doctors throughout my entire life, and not a single one even suggested that it's cerebral palsy. And cerebral palsy is an incurable condition. Trying to wrap my head around something like that after spending so much time to improve my health and my physicality. And then I seen her. I went to an orthopedic surgeon, neurologist, and each of them confirmed that it's cerebral palsy. And none of them could fathom how any of the doctors growing up didn't pick it up. They say it's like you don't have to do any tests. It's visible just from seeing you. The thing with cerebral palsy, like if you look at me now, it looks like there's nothing wrong with me. But as soon as I move, then it's I can't even straighten my hands. My legs don't bend properly. I trip over everything. I can trip over my own 2 feet while walking. So falling is a constant thing for myself. But so then after finding out that condition, I mean, I lost my dad, I lost my home, I lost everything. I went back to try and improve my health, only to find out that I have an incurable condition. I don't know. It's a lot for someone to take. I went through a lot of depression. I'm still going through it as well. I don't know. I don't know if I've accepted it, but I still want to try to find a way to improve my health at least a bit. Then I found out about the surgery. It's called selective dorsal rhizotomy. So basically, it's a spinal surgery, and it's the only type of surgery that it can't cure the condition, but it eliminates the spasticity within my body, so which gives me a little bit more freedom of movement. which means I can better take care of myself. The surgery, there's maybe a handful of surgeons in the world that can perform the surgery on adults, because a lot of the surgery is performed mainly on children, because adults, there's obviously comes with a more risk. So I've contacted a couple of neurosurgeons in Europe and in the US, and the goal is to get the surgery just so that I just want to be a little bit healthier so that I can look after myself. I don't want to have to be constantly worried about, oh no, if I'm going to trip and fall and hit my head and there's nothing I can do, I'm just laying there. And it's happened before. I've literally fallen, knocked the back of my head on a door handle, and I was alone. There was nothing I could do. I had to take an Uber to the hospital because I had no one to take me. And this is with possibly a concussion, severe vertigo. And then the doctors checked me up and then had to take an Uber back. So, having to deal with all of these things on your own while you can't move. And as I'm getting older, it's getting worse and worse. They say with cerebral palsy that it's possible that I could even lose my ability to walk completely. Being alone and not being able to look after yourself, I don't want to reach that point. The surgery will give me it's not going to fix everything, but it gives me that ability to be able to take care of myself for at least a little while longer. So the goal, I found out about surgery. The surgery is incredibly costly. It's $50,000 just for the surgery. And then obviously I have to focus on the rehab. The rehab, in some ways, is more important than the surgery, because the rehab dictates how much we improve, because I have to relearn how to walk, how to move, how to sit. I have to build muscle that there's never been any muscle there before. So I have to find a way to strengthen. I won't be able to work. So I have to live and do everything, because I'm alone. I have to do everything on my own while doing rehab, So that's why I started up this fundraiser. A friend of mine's in the UK, they persuaded me to start up this fundraiser to say, you know what, you can't do this on your own. You have to find a way to get others to help you to do it. And right now, that's what I'm doing. I'm just, asking people for help.
Yeah, and so I believe I'm right in thinking that you started this fundraiser in August 2021. So this has been, a long-term
Yeah.
already. We're talking nearly 3 years at the time of recording this. You've raised just over £31,000 so far. But as you say, the cost of the surgery is $50,000 US. So it would be good if people listening to this incredible story and absolute admiration for your strength throughout all of that as well, Kamal. You mentioned the losing your mother, losing your father, and then also finding out about this misdiagnosis, which has impacted you for your entire life. I'll make sure the link for the GoFundMe is down in the description as well. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Kamal, before we wrap this up.
No, any help that I can get, I would be I'd be so grateful for it. This thing would literally change my life. Even without the rehab, just the surgery alone changes everything in my life. And I can't state how important that is for me and how beneficial it would be. So, whoever's listening, I would be so eternally grateful for all your help.
Yeah,
doing this on my own, I can't do it on my own.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for coming on, Kamal. And as I say, thank you for your strength and resilience in the face of all those trials and tribulations as well. And as I say, listen, I know times are tough and it's hard for people to be putting money aside for these sorts of things. But if you do have the money to give, I'll make sure that the link for the GoFundMe is down in the description. Please give whatever you can to support Kamal's cause, a huge red, someone who was fundamental in one of the probably the biggest Liverpool fan forum, and a forum that's meant a lot to the Anfield Rap down the years as well. And thank you very much for coming on, Kamal. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your support as well. I'm grateful.
Okay, well, thank you very much to Josh there. I'm no sooner have we not even yet signed Martin Zubimendi than I'm considering our next signing even.
I like the plural.
Yeah, the optimism implied in that. I think we talked the previous show actually before we knew Zuber Mendy was so high up on Liverpool's list, about how the revelations from Arne Slot and Richard Hughes suggested that Liverpool were looking closer to signing big names than they were to projects or prospects. Beth, if Zuber Mendy is to happen, that shows yes they are looking for quasi transformative signings. Richard Hughes said when he was interviewed with Slot, whenever it was, 5 or 6 weeks ago, that we think things will begin to hot up in August. Well, it looks like he might have been as true as his word here. Do you think they're going to come along like buses now, in all seriousness, the signings? If Liverpool are... In fact, I tell you, the notion that occurred to me, do you think Liverpool set themselves a bit of a deadline? And we are now at that deadline. So they said, we'll give ourselves 5 weeks to haggle, piss about, but then we've got to put our money where our mouth is. It can't go on much longer than that. And is what we're seeing with the Zuber Mendy situation, the first part of that deadline being reached that they set themselves?
Yeah, I think the way that the Zuber Mendy transfer has played out so far is very much sort of vintage Michael Edwards, isn't it? In the sense a name gets touted at 8 a.m. and then, by the end of the day, it's really hotted up and he's on the brink of signing, and that's obviously what we hope is happening here. And so I think I wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple more bits of business like that over the next couple of weeks. Liverpool, as much as we've said Arne Slot needed time to look at his squad, which he absolutely does, him and the recruitment team will have, for a fair bit of time now, had their eye on the players that they will have been looking to sign. And I think they've maybe, as you say, set themselves a bit of a deadline where they're going to be really looking to push ahead. I think they don't want to get into a situation where they're scrambling around on deadline day and they're having to pay over the odds for a player. That's just not the way that Liverpool like to operate. We know that. So yeah, I think over the next week, I think we might see a fair bit more movement. I'd like them to maybe bring in 3. I think I'd really like them to bring in a defender. Obviously, we know they're not really linked to too many names at the moment. Obviously, Yoro and Calafiori were the 2 big ones, weren't they, for the bulk of the summer that they were linked to, and we know they've now gone elsewhere. So I'm not sure who their leading candidate would be in that position, but I would like them to bring in another defender.
I've got a candidate for you.
Go on.
Hincapié. It was revealed by Florian Plettenberg for Bild this morning that there's a strong feeling that he could go within the next month.
Yeah, and he's someone that we know that Liverpool like. They've been linked to him. They were linked to him last summer as well, weren't they? As well. So perhaps that is something that they're keeping an eye on. The right sort of profile for the players that we know that they like to target. So that could well be one to keep an eye on. I still have a weird Anthony Gordon feeling. I think that could...
That's not weird, Beth.
Perfectly healthy.
Yeah,
that's normal. It's been normalised.
Just pumping it through the airwaves.
Yeah, I still wouldn't be surprised if he ends up at Liverpool. I think there will be 2 signings definitely, and I think the third one is dependent on Anthony Gordon. That's my prediction.
What's your prediction, Neil, as to what? And do you think this is going to play out as quickly as I'm thinking and wishing?
I think there's going to be a big turnaround, a quick turnaround one way or the other on Big T. Tony Gordon. I think if there's
medium-sized T,
if there's Big T, if there's I think that ultimately I think Newcastle are going to put a new contract in front of him.
Performative new contract.
I don't think it's performative necessarily, in that I suspect it'll be a contract that would make him the highest paid player at Newcastle. I think he then says yes or no to that. If his response is to say no to that, then I think Newcastle have got a quick decision to make. And what Newcastle have actually got is they're in a position where the new sporting director can blame the previous guard and say, listen, they were the ones who bought him for 45 million and only gave him a 3.5 year deal. That's put the pressure on us. He's knocked it back, so he can blame them. He can blame Gordon. He's not interested. He wants to go. He's made that clear to us, and he doesn't see his future here for the long term. Therefore, we've got a decision to make: go from there, negotiate with Liverpool, and come out the other side. And I think that could all happen genuinely quite quickly, because Gordon is back in training in Newcastle, and I think that Newcastle are I think that Newcastle do need to sort of action it their side a little bit, but then from there I think that there could be quick ramifications, and then if Liverpool and Newcastle can come to an agreement, the big thing to point out is that if Endo moves on, Morton moves on, Liverpool and Newcastle come to an agreement on Gordon, Liverpool have got a lot of good players under the age of 26, a lot of good players under the age of 26 currently suddenly in that side, and the area where you'd say they might want another one who's really good under the age of 26 could be at central defence. But then I think it will be quite Liverpool to sort of say, all right, well, we're going to address that next summer, and we're going to take our time and think about it.
There's a big Joe Gomez question there, isn't there?
There's a Joe Gomez question, but it looks like Gomez feels as though he's not going anywhere, and Liverpool therefore can just basically go with that knowledge, move forward with that knowledge, at least for an extended period of time. And then it wouldn't surprise me, there's been some noise, you mentioned Hincapié, maybe there's been some noise around a younger left-back option. That wouldn't surprise me either if Liverpool
Julio
then
Soler, the Argentinian
he's
kid.
one example, but there might be someone else that we don't know about yet. It wouldn't surprise me if someone like that comes in. And then it wouldn't surprise me if someone like that comes in, but maybe no one goes at the back. Maybe Vandenberg goes, but no one else goes. Off the basis that Liverpool may just think we want to spend 3 or 4 months getting Robertson right. This lad who's coming in will only, when I say it's a young left back, if it is someone who's only about 19, we don't see them playing that much of a role. So it suits Liverpool to sort of run with Shimmercast for 3 months, and then they can do something in January if they want. Because everyone keeps forgetting January exists.
Yes.
Certainly where the outs are concerned, Liverpool can move. They could choose to do the same thing with Endo. Liverpool could have the attitude of, well, you know what we're going to do? There's going to be League Cup games. Do we want to be playing Trey Ione and Bajcetic in a midfield together in the League Cup? Or do we want it to be a designated grown-up? Things like that knocking around in there as well. So I think that we keep forgetting, and I think we remember January in terms of ins. We just sort of forget January in terms of outs. And I think that Liverpool could choose to go with a slightly bigger squad for the first period of the season. Let the manager work with them a bit more, make a couple more decisions, and then it reduces in January, and Liverpool see that's part of the same financial year and all of that sort of stuff. So that's what I think Liverpool. I'm not saying Liverpool will do a forward, an attacker, if they don't do Gordon for certain. But I think Liverpool will. I think Liverpool just clearly really want to do Gordon. Gordon.
I agree. I tell you what I'd be interested in your thoughts on, Mo, is I'm thinking back to how the season ended and when we first were doing these shows and sort of crystal ball gazing as to what the start of the season would look like, the period we're approaching. There was significant anxieties around a number of players, that a number of players could not be lining up under Arne Slot. I would list those as Luis Diaz, even Darwin Núñez after some of those spats towards the end of the season. Mohamed Salah, certainly there was, will he stay or will he take a contract elsewhere? And we learnt Joe Gomez was disposable quite quickly on. I won't even go into Trent. Do you think, those, in terms of the big names, those 4 and even Trent 5, do you think we can almost say we're out of the woods in terms of them all being available to Slot by the end of August still?
Maybe.
Give me a percentage there.
Okay, so it's different with all of them. I think Salah, yes.
Yeah.
I think Diaz, probably. The thing with Núñez, we still don't know if he's going to get a ban for all of the Copa America business. So, that is still hanging over. That's still a live threat. So, obviously, if that comes into play, then obviously no. Outside of that, I think...
But he won't go apart from that.
No. Gomez, as Neil said, it looks like he's happy to stay around, so I'm happy with that too. And Trent, I mean, we've not really heard from him. So I think it's difficult to say anything's changed when we don't know if it has changed or not. So I would still say that until I see him standing there with the pen in his hand, I'm still not necessarily willing to be definitive on Trent.
I don't think PSG have finished the business. I think Barcelona may have done, just simply by virtue of the financial straits.
Looks like he's getting
that's what I mean. So I think that might be Barcelona can't do anything else because of the financial straits they find themselves in. It's still possible that someone decides that they want to pay what will be Liverpool's asking price for Diaz. I don't think that's outrageous. I just only think there's maybe 2 or 3 clubs, full stop, who could be those people.
Rafinha, I think, may be the moving part in all this at Barca because there's talk of him going to Saudi. Well, it's quieting down, but there was.
Now, if Barcelona are going for Dani Olmo, he's not a traditional winger. So in that would mean that if their Rafinha is going to go, then they would look for a traditional winger. PSG, I personally think they're going to go with Bradley Barcola as their first choice left winger. And to be honest, if I was them, I would too, because I think he's got lots of potential. So yeah, Barcelona and Rafinha might be the one where Diaz suddenly becomes a live moving part.
But we haven't seen Diaz play for Slot yet. And Slot hasn't seen Diaz play for Slot yet. I think Sundays are really... It would be another quite telling day. I think that the thing you've been able to say about the games on the tour, and I think you'll be able to say about the 2 games on Sunday, and both of them are on the telly, by the way, I hasten to add, both of them are LFC TV, and we will be doing listeners post-match shows on both of them. But there is I think that we're going to get a bit of information from that. For instance, a really good question is who starts right wing against Las Palmas? I'm presuming Salah starts right wing against Sevilla. Who starts right wing against Las Palmas?
Well, it's interesting because a strong team will start against Las Palmas because the lads who've all just come back Monday won't start against Sevilla, will they?
Well, we don't know.
It's unlikely.
I think that it's possible Van Dijk does and no one else does. I think he'll want his team against Sevilla to be his starting team against Ipswich as close as he can get it. So... But then I think it won't be one where then all the subs will be really strong because I think he wants to get 60, 70 minutes into the other lads who don't play. So I think you might almost have the same group of subs for both games and then it's a different 11. So the question is, genuinely, who do we think starts right wing against Las Palmas?
Yeah, it could be Luis Diaz, couldn't it?
Well, that would be intriguing if it was Luis Diaz. I think that we might see, in terms of the Zuber Mendy move, I think it's possible, therefore, you throw and open the idea you get some Szoboszlai or some Elliott deputising for Salah. That's possible. Diaz deputising for Salah as well, possibly. Alternating with rather than deputising for, because we're back to this idea of when the games do start to come thick and fast and all of them matter. How Liverpool get through that, I think, is going to be difficult and tricky. So that's why I think they're going to be 2 really interesting games in terms of both the selection and then what we get to see these 2 at the weekend. And then there's going to be a bit of a funny period where people are going to do things about, to the Trent point, who does or doesn't play in August because there's a week between games and everyone's going to lose their minds because they're not going to be the lived reality of the games when they're coming thick and fast. But I think Sunday is actually going to be really quite telling because it'll tell us. That one question I think is absolutely fascinating. I think the other moving part now is genuinely what does he think of Carvalho? Does he see Carvalho as a genuine option in there? If he does, that could have ramifications as well in terms of what it is that he wants. I think that's now part of this is what does he see that role? What do he and they, because they are 2 different entities in a way. He is part of the they, but he is also a he. See as his role moving forward from this sort of stage.
I think the other fascinating thing is we literally haven't even mentioned Carvalho show is that in terms of the Gordon chat, in terms of Newcastle potentially wanting a player in return, I would say looking at the Newcastle squad and who they got rid of, Tyler Morton and Fabio Carvalho are probably 2 players who they would very much like to have within their squad. So that might be something that comes down to the wire.
On that bombshell, done deal. Deal sheet presented. I'm calling it here. Thank you very much, guys. I hope those who've joined us for the first time on the Transfer Gutter have enjoyed the sojourn. You can, of course, get more of it, certainly by subscribing. Okay, we're going to see you all again at the weekend.
Saturday.
Saturday,
You're in the chair
Tuesday,
Saturday.
Thursday. It's onwards and upwards until Liverpool sign all the footballers in the world.